Ani Jayek Minagishget. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome back to our Braiding Sweetgrass book club series. We are on episode 10. So we've come quite a long way. I hope you've had a great week. It's kind of stormy here today, so it's a good time to do this. One thing I want to tell you before we get down is we're starting to reach the end of Braiding Sweetgrass, and so I want to start preparing for the next book we'll do, because this has been so much fun and so good for me, and hopefully good for you too, that I want to keep going. So if you haven't read or heard of Heartberries by Therese Marie Melhout, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, things often when we read them aren't how they're said. But anyway, I just finished reading this book and it is so raw and deep. I want to discuss it. Now, Therese is a Pacific Northwest native, I think Seabird Island band, and born and raised on the res, dealing with alcoholism, some sexual abuse and that sort of thing. The Indigenous women, unfortunately, are very aware. And you probably can hear my son. It's guitar lesson time in the next room, so just go with it. Anyway, so and it's a fairly short book, so we could probably just do 1 or 2 sessions on it. If you're easily triggered by talks of alcoholism, sexual abuse, or physical abuse, it might not be the book for you, but it also might. Usually that stuff is fairly triggering to me, but I was able to get through this book okay. So just use your own judgment. You can always, if it gets to be too much, just put the book down and carry on, do whatever you need to do. But I think it's worth discussion. So after our Braiding Sweetgrass series, I will be doing a Heartberries series book club. Just so you're aware, if you want to go ahead and order your books now. I got this off of Amazon, but I think it's still at print everywhere. This is a very, very good book. Okay, moving on. Okay, like for all of our sessions, I always smudge first. I make sure I have a glass of water or a cup of tea. I recommend that, but do whatever helps you to get centered to start the session so that you're not trying to multitask. It's a little difficult because I can hear my son in the next room, but we do what we have to do, right? So I've smudged, I feel centered, I have my drink. I like to sit with my legs folded, but whatever works for you. And just let your shoulders roll back. Feel your seat bones relax and your gut relax. Take a big deep breath in and out. Let's begin. Okay, so we are on 167, Maple Nation, a Citizenship Guide. And I find it very cool that we're talking about this now, because in the book she's at the same place as far as time. So the Anishinaabe, my people, believe that our new year doesn't start on January. It starts when spring starts. And so with this new moon, we call it the Gizibashkwet Gizis, and it's called the Maple Sugar Moon. That's when the new year starts, because that's when everything wakes up, right? So so I find it really cool that we're reading this now at the same time as in the book, because with the maple sugar or maple syrup harvest, it's usually done about this time. When I first moved to Tennessee, we have a lot of maple trees on our property. And when we first moved here, I was able to tap and make maple syrup every year. I would usually start in February though, but the last 3 years I haven't been able to tap, and it's because of climate change. In order for the tap or for the maple tree for those of you that don't know, for those that I'm just repeating information that you probably already know. But for those that don't know, in order to tap the maple tree, it has to be below freezing at night and then warm up above freezing during the day. And there has to be sufficient moisture in the ground for the tree to make the sap. If it's dry and there's no rain, there's no sap to run. If it doesn't get cold enough at night, it's not going to flow. And the last 3 years, it's either been too dry or too warm. So I haven't been able to get any maple syrup. Anyway, so she's also talking about the census. So I find that interesting how we're kind of repeating. Anyway, so she also goes in to explain the roles of the trees depending on the region. So she talks about state boundaries disappear and are replaced by ecological regions defined by the leading denizens of the region, the iconic beings who shape the landscape, influence our daily lives, and feed us, both materially and spiritually. The map shows the Salmon Nation of the Pacific Northwest and the Pinon Nation of the Southwest, among others. We in the Northeast are in the embrace of the Maple Nation. And if you look on a lot of Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Potawatomi regalia or artwork, there's usually a maple leaf or two because it was life for us. You can not only tap a tree, let's say you were surrounded by contaminated water or something. If you have a maple tree and the conditions are right, you can tap the tree and you get a lovely sugar water. It doesn't come out as syrup, y'all. It comes out as, it's like hummingbird food almost. It's this beautiful, clear, flowing, sweet, sweet water. So it gave us life. It clarified the water. It helped us because we would use it to preserve food. For someone who was sick, it would give them energy. So I love that the maple tree is our life being. Now here we're on page 168. I find this entry really interesting, so I'm going to read it. Here it is, almost tax day, when my fellow humans are getting ready to make their contribution to the well-being of the community. But the maples have been giving all year long. Their contribution of limb wood kept my old neighbor, Mr. Keller's house warm all winter when he couldn't pay the oil bill. The volunteer fire department and the ambulance squad as well rely on maple contributions to their monthly pancake breakfast to raise funds for a new engine. The trees make a real dent in the energy bill for the school with their shade. And thanks to big canopies of maples, nobody I know ever pays a bill for air conditioning. They donate shade to the Memorial Day parade every year without even being asked. If it weren't for the maples' ability to break the wind, the highway department would have to plow snowdrifts off the road twice as often. And you know where she's probably going with that. We complain about paying taxes all year, or I hear often people complain about increased taxes for combating climate change, or even if people will complain about paying taxes for school if they don't have kids in school. But the fact is, we're a community, we all live here. And so if someone doesn't pay, what is going to happen to the society that you enjoy? So I love that she's touching on this as well. Go ahead and drop your comments in the comment box and we'll have a discussion on how you feel about that. So I feel like it's important to read this next part. On page 169 at the bottom, we haven't even mentioned how they, meaning the maple trees, create habitat for songbirds and wildlife cover, golden leaves to shuffle through, tree forts and branches for swings. Centuries of their falling leaves have built this soil, now farmed for strawberries, apples, sweet corn, and hay. How much of the oxygen in our valley comes from our maples? How much carbon is taken from the atmosphere and stored away? These processes are what ecological scientists term ecosystem services, the structures and functions of the natural world that make life possible. We can assign and economic value to maple timber or gallons of syrup, but ecosystem services are far more precious, and yet these services go unaccounted for in the human economy. As with the services of local government, we don't think about them unless they are missing. There is no official tax system to pay for these services as we pay for snow plowing and school books. We get them for free, donated continually by Maples. They do their share for us. The question is, how well do we do by them? And that's an excellent question, isn't it? Okay, so then she goes on. Our Anishinaabe word for maple is anonemic, the man tree. My wife makes maple cake, says Mark, and we always give out candy maple leaves at Christmas. Larry's favorite is to just pour it on vanilla ice cream. My 96-year-old grandma likes to take a pure spoonful every once in a while when she's feeling low. She calls it vitamin M. Next month, the college will hold a pancake breakfast here, where staff and faculty and families gather to celebrate sticky fingered membership in Maple Nation, our bond to each other and to this land. Citizens also celebrate together. I just thought that was incredibly beautiful. That whole passage, and it's hard to put into words better than Robin did, but it makes me feel like our Anishinaabe ancestors always knew this, and to them it was just like, yeah, the Maple people, and it was just, and then it was also like our duty to give back, and I just felt like that was incredibly beautiful. Okay, page 173. I want to read this. When I get home, I look up the citizenship oaths for various human nations. They have many elements in common. Some require allegiance to a leader, most are a pledge of loyalty, an expression of shared beliefs, and an oath to obey the laws of the land. The United States rarely permits dual citizenship. You have to choose. On what basis do we select where we invest our allegiance? If I were forced, I would choose Maple Nation. If citizenship is a matter of shared beliefs, then I believe in the democracy of species. If citizenship means an oath of loyalty to a leader, then I choose the leader of the trees. If good citizens agree to uphold the laws of the nation, then I choose natural law, the law of reciprocity, of regeneration, of mutual flourishing. I think that is the most favorite thing I've heard out of all of this. I love that statement so much. I think I am going to print that out and frame it. I love it. Read that or listen to it again and let me know what you think. I really want to know your thoughts on this as well. Okay, I'm going to read further. The oath of citizenship for the United States stipulates that citizens will defend the nation against all enemies and take up arms if they are called to do so. If that same oath held in Maple Nation, the trumpet call would be echoing through these wooded hills. Maples of the United States face a grave enemy. The most highly regarded models predict that the climate of New England will become hostile to sugar maples within 50 years. Rising temperatures will reduce seedling success, and regeneration will thereby start to fail. It already is failing. Insects will follow, and the oaks will get the upper hand. Imagine New England without maples. Unthinkable. A brown fall instead of hills of fire. Sugar houses boarded up. No more fragrant clouds of steam. Would we even recognize our homes? Is that a heartbreak we can bear? That is something I think we all need to read and think about. Because 50 years isn't that long. And even if we're old right now, our children and our grandchildren, imagine their life without maples. And you know it's not just going to be the maples that go. It's a running threat on the left and the right. If things don't change, I'm moving to Canada. It looks like the maples will have to do just that. Like the displaced farmers of Bangladesh fleeing rising sea levels, maples will become climate refugees. To survive, they must migrate northward to find homes at the boreal fringe. Our energy policy is forcing them to leave. They will be exiled from their homelands for the price of cheap gas. We do not pay at the pump for the cost of climate change, for the loss of ecosystem services provided by maples and others. Cheap gas now or maples for the next generation. Call me crazy, but I would welcome the tax that would resolve that question. Same. Individuals far wiser than I have said that we get the government we deserve. That may be true, but the maples are most generous of benefactors and most responsible of citizens do not deserve our government. They deserve you and me speaking up on their behalf. To quote our town councilwoman, show up at the damn meeting. Political action, civic engagement, these are powerful acts of reciprocity with the land. The Maple Nation Bill of Responsibilities asks us to stand up for the standing people, to lead with the wisdom of maples. Now, if that wasn't the best speech ever, I don't know what was. That was brilliant. And fact. We need to change now, or the change is going to happen, and not in a good way either. Now, I love this part. She says the dense patches of leeks are among the first to appear in the spring. They're green, so vivid that they'll signal like a neon sign. Pick me. I resist the urge to answer their call immediately and instead address the plants the way I've been taught, introducing myself in case they've forgotten, even though we've been meeting like this for years. I explain why I've come and ask their permission to harvest, inquiring politely if they would be willing to share. I think that is a very important part for us to talk about because so many of us have forgotten to do that. And she talks about that a lot in the book. But most Indigenous people know the way to harvest things. Not all of us. Some of us are very lost, or some of us get greedy. You know, we're human too. But as Indigenous people, we're traditionally taught that you speak to everything and everything knows your name. Everything has a spirit and everything has energy. So before you harvest anything, whether it's an animal or a plant or a leaf or a tree, anything, you introduce yourself. I mean, if you're hunting, you do it a little bit more quietly, but you introduce yourself, you say your intention for needing to harvest that, whether it's for medicine or food or whatever. And then you listen for signs. If it's not okay for you to take, you'll know a sign will happen, or the hunt won't be successful or whatever. And then you always, you know, especially if it's an animal or a medicine, we put down tobacco for that as well. So, but the Indigenous people of Turtle Island of the Americas aren't the only Indigenous people. So many times the non-Indigenous people of the Americas and Europe forget that they have Indigenous roots as well. So I get frustrated a lot when non-Indigenous people like to try to steal like our culture with the headdresses and the burning sage and dream catchers and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, you have your own. Your ancestors are just waiting for you to say, hello, I want to reconnect with my Indigenous roots. The Celtics and the Druids and like all of the other stuff in Europe and everywhere, you have your own roots before Roman Christianity colonization. And so many people have forgotten that. So no wonder they're grasping at straws at other cultures to try to find some kind of connection. But they have their connection. They just need to recognize that they are Indigenous, but just in a different way. Anyway, I could go on forever about that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to slow down and we're going to stay focused on braiding sweetgrass. So moving on. So I want to go on and read. This is 175 to 176. Eating leeks is a spring tonic that blurs the line between food and medicine. It wakens the body from its winter lassitude and quickens the blood. But I have another need too, that only the greens from this particular woods can satisfy. Both of my daughters will be home for the weekend from the far places where they live. I ask these leeks to renew the bonds between this ground and my children, so that they will always carry the substance of home in the mineral of their bones. That was incredibly beautiful. Incredibly beautiful. Some of the leaves are already expanded, stretching toward the sun, while others are still rolled into spear, thrusting up through the duff. I dig my trowel in and around the edge of the clump, but they're deeply rooted and tightly packed, resisting my efforts. It's just a small trowel and it hurts my winter-softened hand, but at last I pry out a clump and shake away the dark earth. I expected a cluster of fat white bulbs, but in their place I find ragged papery sheaths where the bulbs should be, withered and flaccid. They look as if all the juice has already been sucked out of them, which it has. If you ask permission, you have to listen to the answer. I tuck them back into the soil and go home. Along the stone wall, the elderberries have broken bud, and their embryonic leaves reach out like gloved purple hands. I'd really like to know what you think about that. I especially love the part where she's talking about wanting a taste of home to be solidified in her children's bones. And as mothers, as parents, I think that's like our goal with our children from birth, not only to make sure that they're independent and happy and successful and safe, but to always have that sense of home. And those of us who either don't have a home to go back to, or that home has been stripped away, or the home is not a safe place, I think we understand how much that means for our children to have a home, a safe home to return to, whether it's just in person or a physical building, or that sense of home, of belonging, of memory, of community, of love and safety. I know that's something I really wish for my children, to always have that home, not necessarily a building, but that sense of community to go home to. So this was a really interesting paragraph that would be something good for us to go over and have a discussion. It's on page 177. So instead, I live vicariously through the photosynthesis of others. I am not the vibrant leaves on the forest floor. I am the woman with the basket, and how I feel it is a question that matters. If we are fully awake, a moral question arises as we extinguish the other lives around us on behalf of our own. Whether we are digging wild leeks or going to the mall, how do we consume in a way that does justice to the lives that we take? That's what I want to discuss right there. And I would really like to know what you think about that. In our oldest stories, we are reminded that this was a question of profound concern for our ancestors. When we rely deeply on others' lives, there is urgency to protect them. Our ancestors, who had so few material possessions, devoted a great deal of attention to this question, while we who are drowning in possessions scarcely give it a thought. The cultural landscape may have changed, but the conundrum has not. The need to resolve the inescapable tension between honoring life around us and taking it in order to live is part of being human. Okay, so now we're on page 178, and she's back about a week later looking for more leeks. More time has passed, so they've been able to get more fluid and grow a little bit more, and she's found a clump. Asking permission shows respect for the personhood of the plant, but it is also an assessment of the well-being of the population. Thus, I must use both sides of my brain to listen to the answer. The analytic left reads the empirical signs to judge whether the population is large and healthy enough to sustain a harvest, whether it has enough to share. The intuitive right hemisphere is reading something else, a sense of generosity, an open handed radiance that says, "Take me," or sometimes a tight lipped uh, recalcitrance that makes me put my trowel away. I can't explain it, but it is kind of knowing that it is for me just as compelling as a no trespassing sign. This time, when I push my trowel deep, I come up with a thick cluster of gleaming white bulbs, plump, slippery, and aromatic. I hear yes. So I make a gift from the soft old tobacco pouch in my pocket and begin to dig. I just thought that was wonderful. Um, and it shows her scientific botanist brain going through analyzing everything, right? But then I love how she also listens to her more intuitive, I've got a feeling brain. um I wish I could listen more to my analytical brain, to be honest, because too often I am led by emotion. And if I stop to analyze a little bit more, it'd probably help me out a little bit. Okay, we're moving on. We're on page 179. The traditional ecological knowledge of indigenous harvesters is rich in prescriptions for sustainability. They are found in native science and philosophy, in lifeways and practices, but most of all in stories. The ones that are told to help restore balance, to locate ourselves once again in the circle. Anishinaabe elder Basil Johnston tells of the time our teacher Nanabosho was fishing in the lake for supper. Now, Basil Johnston is an amazing author. He wrote several books like The Manitous and The Spirit Way of the Ojibwe. Very knowledgeable. So those are other books that I recommend you read. Anyway, so that's Basil Johnston. He tells of the time our teacher, Nana Bojo, was fishing in the lake for supper, as he often did with hook and line. Heron came striding along through the reeds on his long, bent legs, his beak like a spear. Heron is a good fisherman and a sharing friend, so he told Nana Bojo about a new way to fish that would make his life much easier. Heron cautioned him to be careful not to take too many fish. But Nanabosho was already thinking of a feast. He went out early the next day and soon had a whole basketful of fish. So heavy he could barely carry it, and far more than he could eat. So he cleaned all of those fish and set them out to dry on the racks outside his lodge. The next day, with his belly still full, he went back to the lake and again did what Heron had showed him. Ah, he thought as he carried home the fish, I will have plenty to eat this winter. Day after day he stuffed himself, and as the lake grew empty, his drying racks grew full, sending out a delicious smell into the forest where Fox was licking his lips. Again he went to the lake, so proud of himself. But that day his nets came up empty, and Heron looked down on him as he flew over the lake with a critical eye. When Nanabosho got home in his lodge, he learned a key rule. Never take more than you need. The racks of fish were toppled in the dirt, and every bite was gone. Cautionary stories of the consequences of taking too much are ubiquitous in native cultures, but it's hard to recall a single one in English. Perhaps this helps to explain why we seem to be caught in a trap of overconsumption, which is as destructive to ourselves as to those we consume. Now that story, I mean, many of us were taught as kids, but like she said, how do you translate that to modern day, needing the ease of technology, the ease of life, the fast pace need everything right now, materialistic kind of lifestyle that we live. Um, so it almost seems like we need to all change the way we view success and happiness, because so many measure success as that bank tab. You know, how much is in your savings account? How much liquid assets do you have? Um, and where is that really going to get? Is that really how we need to measure success, or do we measure success in how harmonious we are with everything around us? Wouldn't life be a lot simpler if we just kind of change that up a little bit? Okay, I'm going to read on because I think it's important. So Robin goes on to say, collectively, the indigenous canon of principles and practices that govern the exchange of life for life is known as the honorable harvest. They are rules of sorts that govern our taking, shape our relationships with the natural world, and rein in our tendency to consume, that the world might be as rich for the seventh generation as it is for our own. The details are highly specific to different cultures and ecosystems, but the fundamental principles are nearly universal among people who live close to the land. I'm a student of this way of thinking, not a scholar. As a human being who cannot photosynthesize, I must struggle to participate in the honorable harvest, so I can lean in close to watch and listen to those who are far wiser than I am. What I share here, in the same way they were shared with me, are seeds gleaned from the fields of their collective wisdom, the barest surface of the moss on the mountains of their knowledge. I feel grateful for their teachings and responsible for passing them on as best I can. Now, isn't that all what we really can ask for? Um, and just as an analogy or a story of, like, how do I put this into words? um, there's so many times that we are the seeds, and other times that we are the fruit giver. So many times we are still like in that infantile stage, and so many we are the nokomis, the grandma, the auntie of knowledge. It's never one or the other. It almost seems like we're in this constant cycle of relearning, learning, relearning over and over again, and teaching along with that. Like, I'm teaching my children, but then there's times where they're teaching me. So it's never you're a child, so you're a seed. Now you're an older person, so now you're the teacher. It's not like that. It's a constant cycle that is constantly morphing and changing and cycling. So sometimes you're the seed, sometimes you are the fruit bearer, sometimes you are the seed planter. It's not all or nothing, sometimes it's all of it at the same time. I hope that made sense. Anyway, drop what you think, and if you were able to interpret my thoughts, and we'll discuss some more. So, this chapter, The Honorable Harvest, is a fairly long one, and so I can't go over everything in too much detail. But hopefully you've all got this book and you're reading it too, so anything that I don't talk about, please feel free to talk about in the comments. But I want to talk about this entry on page 185, towards the end of this section. How can we distinguish between that which is given by the earth and that which is not? When does taking become outright theft? I think my elders would counsel that there is no one path, that each of us must find our own way. In my wandering with this question, I found dead ends and clear openings. Discerning all that it might mean is like bushwhacking through dense undergrowth. Sometimes I get faint glimpses of a deer trail. And isn't that just so true? Like, so many times, like, we feel we have the answer right there at our fingertips, and then it's gone. But I want to know what you feel about that too, so drop it in the comments and we will discuss. This is a really good section as well I want to read. It's on page 186 and 187. The honorable harvest does not ask us to photosynthesize. It does not say don't take, but offers inspiration and a model for what we should take. It's not so much a list of do nots as a list of do's. Do eat food that is honorably harvested and celebrate every mouthful. Do use technologies that minimize harm. Do take what is given. This philosophy guides not only our taking of food, but also the taking of the gifts of Mother Earth. Air, water, and the literal body of the earth, the rocks and soil and fossil fuels. Taking coal buried deep in the earth for which we must inflict irreparable damage violates every precept of the code. By no stretch of the imagination is coal given to us. We have to wound the land and water to gouge it from Mother Earth. What if a coal company planning mountaintop removal in the ancient folds of the Appalachians were compelled to law to take only what is given? Don't you long to hand them the laminated card and announce that the rules have changed? By the laminated card, she's talking about hunting and fishing license. It doesn't mean that we can't consume the energy we need, but it does mean that we honorably take only what is given. The wind blows every day. Every day the sun shines. Every day the waves roll against the shore, and the earth is warm below us. We can understand these renewable resources of energy as given to us, since they are the sources that have powered life on the planet for as long as there has been a planet. We need not destroy the earth to make use of them. Solar, wind, geothermal, and tidal energy, the so-called clean energy harvests, when they are wisely used, seem to me to be consistent with the ancient rules of the honorable harvest. And the code might ask of any harvest, including energy, that our purpose be worthy of the harvest. Oren's deer made moccasins and fed 3 families. What will we use our energy for? I'd like to know what you think about that. So let's discuss. Okay, we're going to go ahead and finish up. We're on page 200 to 201. We need the honorable harvest today, but like the leeks and the marten, it is an endangered species that arose in another landscape, another time, from a legacy of traditional knowledge. That ethic of reciprocity was cleared away along with the forests, the beauty of justice traded away for more stuff. We've created a cultural and economic landscape that is hospitable to the growth of neither leeks nor honor. If the earth is nothing more than an inanimate matter, if lives are nothing more than commodities, then the way of the honorable harvest, too, is dead. But when you stand in the stirring spring woods, you know otherwise. It is an inanimate earth that we hear calling to us, feed the martens and kiss the rice. Wild leeks and wild ideas are in jeopardy. We have to transplant them both and nurture their return to the lands of their birth. We have to carry them across the wall, restoring the honorable harvest, bringing back the medicine. I think that is a great place to end for the day, for the week. And then we'll be moving on to, I think it's the last section of Braiding Sweetgrass. And so we'll be covering In the Footsteps of Nanabojo, Becoming Indigenous to Place, and The Sound of Silver Bells. We'll do that next week. Better keep my place. Okay, so next week we'll carry on with those 2 chapters. But I'd like to know what your comments are here, and your thoughts are on these 2 chapters. I believe what she was getting at was that we need to understand. Again, I think she's just going over to acknowledge how we survive, the little things that we use on a daily basis, as well as the big things like water and food and shelter. If we spent more time acknowledging that, there'd be a whole lot less waste. We wouldn't be worrying about climate change as much. There'd probably be a whole lot more peace in the world, because we wouldn't be fighting over oil and resources, because wind and solar are free, and we don't have to do a whole lot to harvest that natural resource, where with like coal we have to actually strip the land and injure the land forever. So she had a lot of great points in there. Some of the stuff it's not new to me, because it's how I was raised and it's how my family is now. So but I know for a lot of people, it's new information. I'm often amazed, like when the power goes out in town, the people here freak out. Like the power's out and they freak out, and it's always back on in a few hours. Like, if there's a tornado or something, of course, the power's going to be out longer if there's a blizzard. But they seriously don't know what to do when the power's out. They don't know what to do with their time. They don't know what to do as far as food, and it kind of blows my mind. We often didn't have power as kids. So, and I was born in the late 70s. So I like, it always blows my mind. Like, there's so much you can do. I keep gas lamps or oil lamps and candles around the house, for times that the power, it hardly goes out anymore. But I'm always prepared, especially in the wintertime. You have your preparedness. So it always blows my mind when people, when they don't have power, they're like, oh, it's the end of the world. So I find that totally interesting. And I often wonder, like, if their power was gone for so long, like, how would they survive? And I'm not talking about if you have medical issues and need to have oxygen or a CPAP or anything like that. I'm talking about if you don't, just regular to survive, families. Or let's say they don't have medical issues and they don't need to worry about food, but they just don't know what to do with their time, because they don't have their electronics and their computers and their phones and blah, blah, blah. And they don't know what to do with their time. I just find it, there's always something to do. So anyway, I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Let's have a discussion. And again, if you want to join us we'll probably start this. I have to count up the chapters that are left in this book, but I would say probably 2 or 3 more weeks left, and then we'll move on to Heartberries, which is only going to take like 1 or 2 weeks. And then after that, like, let's have some suggestions. I think this is a lot of fun. I'd like to keep doing it. It's good for my heart and brain and spirit. And especially during the life of COVID, we don't get out much. So this has been a great way to stay in touch with other people and other women and discuss issues and growth. I think that's what it's all about. So with that, I'm going to leave you. This has been great. I hope you have a wonderful week. Stay safe, and let me know what your thoughts and feelings and experiences are. I really do read all of your comments, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. Chi-miigwech. Bama-pi. For every Indigenous Author Monday video that I put out, I am dedicating it to the One Shelf Project put on by Gadakana. Gadakana is an Indigenous organization, a 501c3 nonprofit, tax-deductible organization that provides books in their local libraries that are actually accurate, historically accurate, and by Indigenous authors, both fiction and nonfiction. And their goal is to at least have a shelf dedicated to Indigenous accurate information in their local libraries. They can only do this with help through donors, and they need your help. I will put the link down here, so please check them out. The One Shelf Project, another organization near and dear to my heart. Gadakana.